what would you have done now if you were a leading company in that industry, in which you see out of the blue many news articles saying that your technology has problems, changing completely the perception of a technology that is very valuable, because this technology can save a lot of lives.
Hello, Alberto Grasso, and welcome to the Tech for Non-Techies podcast. I'm so happy to have you here with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you teach technology strategy, but you teach that at a business school, not a computer science school. So why is it that business leaders today need to learn about technology strategy?
So I think that there is quite a lot of evidence across a lot of different fields like finance, business, economics, that the main engine of economic growth for organizations and companies is innovation. It's essentially very, very hard to find a story of a company that reached a leadership position in its industry and kept that position for a long period of time without being innovative. Okay, so that's why I think is the number one reason why managers in all sorts of industries and in all sorts of firms, from small firms to large firms, they need to think seriously about technology, because it's a key engine of growth of companies. Reason that I think is also very important is that big changes in the technology space, the development of big new technologies, can have huge effects on industry, can really affect survival of a lot of companies, can generate new business leaders. So to think seriously and look seriously and monitor the new technology development in your industry is crucial. Just an example, we're living now the early stage of the artificial intelligence developments. I'm in one industry like education. It's probably one of those that is being exposed most. We have from 1 month to the other, students being able to do the assignments with just 5 seconds.
It's changing even the education industry, is changing all sorts of industries. So I am curious because I asked you about technology strategy and you started talking about innovation. And I think for some people, they're the same thing. And for other people, they're different. So what do you think of that? And are they the same thing, technology and innovation, or should they be talked about in different things?
So from the business perspective, they are closely related. I usually think about technology and technology strategy in particular. If you tell me like what technology strategy is, I think it's about answering two big questions.
Mm-hmm.
One is related to how, as an organization, I generate ideas for new products and new production processes. So it's kind of related to innovation if we think about innovation as coming out with new product and processes. But there is also probably is related to modernity, the idea of like once we have new technologies that are being developed inside the company or outside the company, how we deal with them in order to generate value.
Interesting. So what you're talking about is, so for example, you could have innovation in how, let's say, Hermes makes a handbag. And obviously they have craftsmen or craftspeople rather that are working with their hands and making leather, and software is not involved in the making of a Hermes handbag, but there's innovation there. And so would you say that that would also fit into technology strategy? Because as you're calling technology, it's basically a process, right? So a process could be handmade leather or it could be an algorithm. Is that right?
That's a little. You're hitting the nail here. Like one of the things that I strongly believe is that when we talk about technology, it's true that historically we always been focusing on few industries. Like you think about the pharmaceutical industry, medical device industry, the software industry, tech. But a lot of the insights that have been developed in helping managing and growing these companies can be useful in all sorts of industries. And especially, today where we have a lot of creative content required in all, every industry has their own, every company has its own web page, has its own, content that is in your interface with customers. Ideas and product are more and more diffused through channels like podcasts or vlogs, or a lot of way in which we should think about managing this type of interaction with consumers is about, it's very similar to the insights that you should have when you think about generating new content in the sense of new product, new technology, new science, because the creative component of the business has risen much more importance these days across all industries.
So could you give us an example? Because, every CEO wants their team to be more innovative. And I think, all of us, we also want to think of ourselves as innovative and creative. I don't think anybody wants to think of themselves as just, boring and doing rubber stamping work. So what are your suggestions for what we can do, or for what companies can do to become more innovative?
Yeah, so I think one important insight that you have from tech strategy, especially from the classic work that was done in the past to think about pharmaceutical industry, to think about tech industry, is that you put a lot of attention to the future. Technology is about the future. It's not about the products that are sold today. It's not about what companies do today. It's about, what is going to happen 5, 10 years from now. Because, a lot of industry, the roles of engineers and scientists is to think hard about the products that are going to be sold in the future and the technology that we're going to use in the future. The idea that thinking and taking seriously about what are your expectations about the future, and use those as guiding your managerial decision today is really important.
So is
So
that sort of understanding consumer trends? Because yes, we need to understand what technology will allow us to do. So, for example, what does 5G allow us to do that 4G doesn't? And, what will 6G mean, and so on. But also, what will people actually want? Because, as I'm sure in your house, you have some super modern things, and
yeah,
also you have some things that, people from the 18th century would have been familiar with, right?
yeah, that's like a really good point. One important I think insight from the literature in technology strategy is that at the end of the day, for a technology to have an impact on a company or in general to society, there should be some value created for the customers, and there should be a way for the organization that develop or produce the technology to kind of get part of this value. And this has important implication in the sense that sometimes things are very exciting for your R&D department. Your engineers, your scientists, your coders are really excited about something, but not necessarily this is the technology you want to push forward, because you may not have success with customers. You may not be able to generate margins that are required to kind of recoup the investment that you do to develop the technology. Going back kind of to your previous question, what innovative companies do, what managers that are, great at technology strategies do, is to kind of find the right balance between what is exciting and cool from the technology perspective, but also what is something that can actually be used to increase my presence with customers, something that can actually help the company grow and increase your kind of market share.
So I guess this is why business leaders are necessary in the technology strategy space, because, well, first of all, the thing needs to make money, right? So whatever the invention is, for it in a business, it's got to make money. And so that means that there's this collaborative approach. Yes, you need the whatever, whether it's going to be engineers or data scientists, but
Yes.
or whoever, the R&D department, basically. So the technical people. Then you also need the commercial people. Say, hey, okay, how are we going to sell this thing? Like, how much is it going to cost to make?
Yeah.
And also you would need consumer insight. So that's probably sales in an enterprise organization, or consumer insight specialists who will know, okay, this is what consumers are going to want. So this is why, and when you are thinking about this cross-disciplinary approach, you're speaking to business leaders or future business leaders, what misconceptions do they have? Like, do they all think you're going to teach them to code in your class?
No, actually, in my classes in general, in the business class, we don't teach them actually to code. What we do is a lot of case studies,
Hmm.
methods in which we go over problems that companies faced with their technology or big decision that they face, whether to explore one technology area or the other, and try to make the student think hard about what would you do, what would you have done in that situation.
Okay.
But
Can we have a kind of a summary version so we can all think about, okay, what would we have done?
I can give you an example of a case
Yeah.
that it's a Harvard Business School case that I wrote with a co-author from Harvard Business School. Her name is Hong Guo. We were looking at a big issue that took place in 2010 in the CT scanner industry. Quite unexpectedly, a few hospitals in California, there were some issue with the CT scanner machines. This machine that do essentially very precise X-ray to patients. A patient
So,
came
sorry,
back to the
city
hospital.
scanners. I thought you were talking about like scanners in cities. What are you?
No, no, CT scanners.
Oh,
Medical
okay.
devices
Oh,
go inside and
oh yes, like
pathology
the
test.
tube thing. Oh, I thought you were talking about like scanner, like a Google Maps kind of situation.
No,
Okay.
in California, some technicians put the settings of this machine wrong. Not all patients got a very high level of radiations. And these are machines that already by themselves give very high level of radiation. So they receive a very high level of radiation. This patient came back with losing hair, and eventually they realized that some of these machines, the settings were
Oh my
was
God,
so
terrifying.
yeah, and on top of that, it was very bad for the consumer, for these patients. Which also, some journalists noticed that, and they started a massive media campaign,
Of course.
writing articles about the dangers of over radiation exposure for diagnostic radiation devices. So we push the students to say, okay, what would you have done now if you were a company, a leading company in that industry, in which you see, out of the blue, many news articles saying that your technology has problems, consumers getting kind of changing completely the perception of a technology that is very valuable, because these are technology can save a lot of lives. These are technologies that are really important in terms of diagnosing possible health issues. You have changed your technology strategy. How would you have given up, for
Yeah.
example, in the technology field?
So what do students normally come up with?
So there is a lot of discussion. Some students say maybe we should give up. For some of this company, it was not a big part of the business. We should kind of give up work in this technology area. Others say, okay, we should wait and see how, for example, legislation is going to evolve and whether standards in the industry are going to change. Others instead saying, okay, we should double down on our innovation activity and try to push hard our R&D department to come up with a newer technology. Eventually, what happened in this industry is that this led to substantial improvements in the technology. The machines that we have now provide much less radiations in order to generate images. So there were like some very quick innovation responses. For example, changes in code to a lot require more passwords to kind of change the setting, but also much more substantial changes in the way these images were constructed using much less radiation. And this was something great for patients, for society, but also something quite good for these companies, because then hospital had to replace their machine with a newer machine, so it's not something that generated some negative, substantially negative.
So then I guess from this, the moral of the story is if there is an issue, don't run away, but see if you can improve the product, because within that there's, you can save lives, but also there's a market opportunity.
Exactly. It's all about, the caveat that you add is really important. Like if there is an opportunity. So here is really important. What one message from this example is that this was a situation which was possible. There were technological paths that were kind of considering the past, but nobody really took them, to the market. So it was kind of there was a, a technological opportunity to
Mm-hmm.
develop something that was with lower radiation. In some cases, it's not possible, or it's possible at costs that are not realistic in terms of like,
Yeah.
having the product on the market. But to look at these opportunities, to think about, are there possible changes to the technology strategies we're developing is really important. What is, you know, not good is to react
Mm-hmm.
impulsively, to just
Mm-hmm.
say, okay, we have, we should give up, we should
Mm-hmm.
like not operate in this area. But to really
Mm-hmm.
consider all the opportunity and the possible options on the table is very important.
Also, this to me looks like a case for being a late adopter, as a customer or as a client. Okay, you want, if there's a new invention, maybe don't be the first person to use it. Wait until people have used it, because inevitably things will go wrong. And then most of the time the product will be improved, and then you can start using it. And we can actually, see this with ChatGPT. Like, I always think about that poor unfortunate lawyer whose name I mentioned on the show before, but I forgot his name, who basically decided to ask ChatGPT for case law, and ChatGPT made it all up. And I think he was quite a well-paid lawyer, well-paid like litigation attorney. And ChatGPT made up all the cases and made up all of the evidence, and he didn't think to check because he didn't know. He didn't know that generative AI could hallucinate. So he presented this in court, and basically he was thrown out of court by the judge because the judge said this is complete nonsense. This obviously made huge headlines. I mean, I don't know like how his career is doing, but he's probably not known as the the brilliant
Yeah,
lawyer. His reputation has definitely taken a hit, but so has the reputation of ChatGPT. And since then, they have improved it, and so we are all benefiting from this this poor lawyer's case. And so I also had similar examples just in my own business when we've worked with tools or we've worked with coding languages that were very new languages, and they hadn't yet had enough problems uncovered. And so what do you think of this? Like, should we be early adopters, or is it smarter to wait? Like, is there a case for
waiting.
being an early adopter, would you say?
In general, technology strategy is really a balance between these two things. Like a very strong second mover advantage. You can learn from the failure, but also it's much easier to kind of copy and develop something a bit better than something that you already seen, then come up from scratch with something else. On the other hand, there's another big area of technology strategies, this intellectual property strategy. If you are the first, you can claim protection on something and then block anybody else to work in your technology area. So technology strategy is about the balance between these two things. There are advantages in being second because you can understand the problems, you can understand what consumer want, you can come up with a better version of something already exists. But there are also advantages in being first because if you are first and you get intellectual property on something, you have the rights to remain the only one that operates in a technology area. You can prevent others to you will work closely to you. And IP strategy is really an important part of that strategy with these things.
So I guess it's about knowing what your strengths are. So if you have an amazing R&D department and your R&D, your science, like that's where you shine, then yes, you are going for first mover advantage. But if that's not your forte, but maybe understanding the consumer and marketing is your forte, that is that second mover advantage. Because here I'm thinking of Apple. Apple is never the first mover, but when they come into a market, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
And what they're really good at is branding and marketing and create and design, right? So like it's not so much the technology, but the actual design which people want. And interesting. So when you are teaching, one of the things I want to delve into is how can a founder or a business leader make the company they work in more innovative?
So yeah, is a big question. One thing I like usually to say is this idea of the value of intellectual property. I think this is something that sometimes people forget. Is a really important aspect of being successful as an innovator, to be able to generate value of your technology. And this is something that I think has also changed dramatically in the past 20 years. Intellectual property and patents in particular has been used for a long time, but has been seen usually as something important for large players. Like if you were a Texas Instrument, it was really the very important. If you were Motorola, it was really important. But about 20 years ago, things started changing. There was a big interview of Bill Gates that really exactly 20 years ago, in 2004, said we should stop thinking about intellectual property, IP, as something for lawyers. It should be really one of the most important things to consider for top executive of companies. This is the way you kind of protect your differentiation, your difference with other firms, is the way you can share your technology with other firms. But it's crucial for the growth of firm and for the competitive advantage of firm. Moreover, a lot of research in the past 10 years have shown that intellectual property is also fundamental for small firms, for technology entrepreneurs and startups. Getting right your first patent application, your first patent portfolio, the first couple of patents, can have huge effects on the survival of firm. There are estimates that say, you're 50% more likely to receive a investment from a VC if your first patent application is done in a way that makes it successful.
Useful for the investors in our audience, because we probably don't have so many people who are filing patents in the Tech for Non-Techies audience, because this is Tech for Non-Techies, so it's mostly business leaders. But we do have quite a few investors in the audience, and so this is useful because in your book, so I've got your book here, The Management of Innovation, and in your book you talk about the fact that yes, a startup was more likely to raise early stage funding, but also a startup is more likely to have a successful IPO if they have patents. So, investors are always asking, me, okay, if I want to invest in the early stages and I don't really understand the technology, what should I be looking at? And so from what you're saying is that, okay, if there is something patentable
Yeah.
and it's patented,
Yeah.
that is a good thing. But the thing is, not everything is patentable, because if it's a kind of a technical invention, then it is. But copyright is much harder to work with. Is that
Yeah.
right?
So you're raising a lot of very important points. So first of all, yes, is becoming more and more important for investors, and even in general for like startup founders to understand that, especially these days, in which we have startups in which products can be on the market 3, 4, 5 years from now. IP is probably the only thing that you have, the only asset that you have. Is an asset that can be used as collateral, is an asset that can be traded. So is really, a crucial asset that the company has. It's not simply something that you do for a legal perspective. There's also been some kind of trends these days in which more and more things can become patentable and are, so people, firms across multiple industries tend to be patenting all sorts of things, particularly the software space. But you're right, also the importance of copyright. has been increasing a lot. Also, there historically, copyright was considered something important if you were a producer of movies, if you were a book publisher, if you are in the music industry. Nowadays, it's really important for managers to understand copyrights in all industries. As kind of we were discussing before, every company these days has a web page, is a main interface with your customers. You need to know what you own in that web page, what you don't own, what permission you need, what don't. All sorts of businesses now tend to use apps to do commerce, and apps are software. They can be protected by copyright. So to really understand how to make sure you know what can be protected and what is not is crucial. So the importance of copyright has been increasing dramatically in the economy.
Got quite a few lawyers who listen to this show, and I think this is going to be, just another case for lawyers learning about digital strategy and digital
Yeah.
technology, because actually this is a great opportunity for lawyers to do interesting and lucrative work, right?
Yeah. So that is another thing that I would try to push in the courses here in the business school. Think about it. So as we were talking before, that you need the right balance between engineering and the science kind of expertise of a company and the business side. There is also the right balance between the legal expertise in the company and the business side. Like the way you structure your IP strategy, for example, it really depends on what you want to do as a company. Like, you want to be a company that becomes the next big leader in your industry? Do you want to be the next Medtronic, the next big medical device company? Or do you want to be someone that, for example, is a supplier of a big medical device company? Depending on that, the type of intellectual property that you want, the approach that you have with the intellectual property, or the teasers, for example, you want to be how aggressive you want to be, really depends on that. Important thing to remember is something that I try to make as a crucial component of my courses, is that data on intellectual property can be very important data for managerial decision making. We across MBAs, I know you did your MBA in Chicago. Probably you also in your courses they were saying you need to use data for your decision making. Is very for executive managers to take decisions just following your instinct. If you have some data, it will be useful to look at the data before taking a decision. And this is something that is easy to say, but is not in practice. How do you do it, especially if you're a startup that has no resources, no product, no sales record? What data do you use? Patent data are very, easy to access. There are portals in which you just do searches and you get information on what are the firms that operate in that technology area, what are the patents that have been filed. And this is super useful information because it's about the future. It's about the products that are going to be sold in the next 5-6 years. Is about the expertise of companies. Is
Yes, so
about
what's coming up. And I don't know if you've seen this, but there's a newsletter called CB Insights, and just ran by this hilarious and very smart guy called Anand Sanwal. And I love his newsletter. So for all of the people watching this or listening to this, definitely sign up. You probably won't read each one because you get a daily email, but he does have this patent watch. And he basically says, okay, we evaluate the patents being filed in a particular industry, and based on our evaluations, this is where we think the market is going. And there are people who actually genuinely use this to make investment decisions. He's not paying me to say this, but I do genuinely think it's a useful way to think about whether, whether you are investing your money, but also where you are investing your time, right? Because all of us, like whether we're investing capital or not, we're investing our time and effort, and you only live once, right? So you want to work in a company that's innovative, whether it's innovative in its marketing or whether it's innovative in its products, but a company that's going to carry on surviving and not basically just going to be a really boring place just waiting to die. So aside from, this is my last question for you. So aside from looking at patent data, say somebody is going for a job interview, or they want to change their jobs, and we are doing this interview in the second half of 2024, so I think people are a bit like, I had all these plans in January, okay, like I need to get on it like now. And so there are, I know some of my listeners really identify with this, so people are like, okay, I need to go to this really cool innovative company now. So how can people identify from the outside that the company that they are targeting or that they're thinking of going to is an innovative company that's going towards the future, or is just going to go down?
That's a very good tough question. But there are a lot of things that you can look at. One thing, for example, that come up in research, especially in management and management of innovation, is the idea that companies that are truly innovative are companies that invest a lot in learning the new scientific development in your field. So, for example, asking a question when you have a job interview about the opportunity not just to use the latest equipment that the company may have, but to keep, track of the last scientific developments. Things like, do you send your engineers and scientists to conferences?
Mhm.
Is there any partnership with the universities in which you can either take courses or to go to seminars or working with joint projects? It's the technical term in of this is called absorptive capacity. Is the company investing in not just developing their own things, but also absorbing new scientific development? This is
I think
really
that this
important.
also applies not just to, companies where there's scientific R&D, but say to a law firm, are their lawyers being are there partnerships with the top law schools in the world? Are they going to conferences? Also, are the lawyers, say, for example, going to tech conferences because, there's going to be so much upcoming regulation, AI regulation and tech regulation, and there being just a lawyer who doesn't understand any of the digital stuff is not going to be enough. So essentially what you're saying is look at how much a company it wants to learn from the outside and how many tentacles it's got to the outside world. And if the company is very insular when they're like, we've got our own training center, we're fine, we've got our centers of excellence, we've got our own conferences, we're the best, then that company is probably stay away.
Exactly, and that is it can be a red flag. It can be a red flag. And sometimes, unfortunately, the fact that the company is very successful and you have a lot of sales and engineers and scientists then are really focused on maybe solving problems related to the current products that they have on the market, or to focus too much on the current technologies, and that create issues, because then you lose track on the new developments in your industry, your new developments in your field, and that can be a problem for the firm. So this idea of like I think is a natural question to ask in a job interview, and also can give you some
Yeah, well, it's also useful
insight.
for us, I think, for us to think about if we can pretend that we are that company, because it's so easy to just focus on your career. For all of us, our email inbox is a nightmare. Like I'm afraid to open it after this interview, right? Our to-do list is never ending, and it's just so tempting to just get the stuff done that you've got done, and then just be like, that's it. And then, I would invite listeners to think about, okay, what is your absorptive capacity? Have you gone to conferences that you haven't been sent to? Like, do
Yeah,
you know what the key conferences are in your industry?
right.
Like, you can just go. You don't have to wait for somebody. And, what about, obviously, you're listening to this, so your absorptive capacity is probably higher than a lot of your colleagues. So well done. But, are you networking? Are you doing things to interact with the wider world
Yeah,
outside of your company?
exactly. Or can you do you devote enough time to kind of learning and studying the new things that are coming out in your field? Like, even sometimes it's easy to say, but are you really putting, something in your calendar, and you know that that particular day in the morning you go to that conference? Or is it something that is not a real commitment, that at the last minute, if an email comes, you're saying, oh no, I need to deal with this and the other stuff? So those are, you're making a very, very good point, like that this is a something that is important for organization, but even at the individual level can be really important.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure. Audience, check out the book, The Management of Innovation. I found it quite useful both from a startup point of view and also from a big company point of view. And definitely, if you want to invest in technology, there's some useful stuff there. So basically, that you can kind of use as a checklist. And obviously, this is not investment advice, so don't sue me. But any new knowledge you can get basically makes you smarter money, right? Okay, so thank you very much and have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.